We are redefining manhood through transparency. My name is Dominique.
I'm Dexter.
And the topic for today is man of the house fathering someone else's son. And this is a topic that, that is actually growing. When you look at I was looking at some of the statistics with the wedlock percentages. Over 40% of kids are born out of wedlock. 1 in 6 kids are living in blended families. So with that being said, there's a lot of stepfathers that's playing that role, that having that role. There's a lot of fathers that are playing the role of a stepfather, and that's not an easy role to play. There's a lot of challenges in that. There are a lot of positives as well, but this is a heavy subject.
I mean, it's really heavy, and I know when we talked about it, I was like, man, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this topic, full justice in the 30-minute window, but we're definitely going to try. But I mean, it's so many nuances as you're talking about the role of a stepfather, and in understanding what it means to come into a family that's already established. And finding your footing, finding your voice, within that family dynamic. So this is definitely a necessary subject, and especially, for brothers who often struggle with, simply relating with another man's child. A lot of times we might not think that it's a difficult task, but truth be told, there's a lot of misconceptions sometimes that are already in place. And there's a lot of, animosity, if not handled correctly, there can be a lot of animosity already in place as those relationships are merging together. And I'm talking about the child and the stepfather.
No, that's a good point. And we both know quite a few brothers who are already playing that role, have that role in their life. And some guys who probably were the child, had a stepfather as well. And the unique thing about this situation is that, in terms of the guys who are not yet married, because I know some guys who are not yet married and who are married in this role. And for those who are not yet married, they are becoming a husband. Yeah. They are becoming a father at the same time. And that's very, very overwhelming. And that can be a very, very overwhelming and a huge challenge. I think another thing that some of the guys have expressed to me, because I just took time out to really just ask a few guys and just hear them out. And, for one thing, one of them just said, I'm stepping into a structure that's already present.
Exactly.
You get what I'm saying?
I do.
So now I have to really just find my way and kind of fit my way in. And that can be something very, very difficult because, how the question is, how do I fit in? Yeah. And then even thinking about the age of the son, because we're primarily focusing on the sons. Yeah. If the son is, 2 years old, the son is maybe 14 years old, that can play a huge that can be a huge dynamic.
Exactly.
So now you have to really understand, okay, is there, is this child going to look at me as a father figure? And if he does, what does that mean? What does that look like? And if he doesn't, what does that mean? And what does that look like?
Man, listen, because I'm pulling on a lot of resources, a lot of examples for this particular subject, and you and I had this conversation before. I remember when I was a young man at the time, young adult. I may have just turned 22, around between that 20 to 22 time frame. And at the time I was dating a woman who had children. And I remember, I liked this woman. I was fond of her kids. But I knew that I was not ready for that responsibility of being a father. And it bothered me, that we were progressing in this relationship, but I couldn't find that resolve that I was, ready to take on this role. Just like you said, your friend who essentially became a father and a husband all in the same day. You know, and my mind is that I could not reconcile the fact that, you know, I just learned how to balance a checkbook, and, you know, here it was, I'm going to be now responsible for some young boys who, you know, truth be told, you know, I'm just getting over that being a boy phase, you know, and now, you know, I'm responsible for somebody else depending upon my decisions. And so, you know, as a result of that, you know, I actually had to end that relationship. And the hard thing about it is that, you know, because these boys were young at the time, and they were getting used to seeing me, there was an attachment being made. And I think the fact that I knew that I wasn't ready for that relationship, but it's still prolonged, I think that made the ending of that relationship harder. And so, you know, those are one of the nuances, I think, you know, as we're talking about understanding the responsibilities associated with coming into this dynamic that sometimes we don't consider. You know, like I said, when I entered into the relationship with this particular woman, you know, I wasn't really thinking about being a father until, you know, she brought me around her children, and now I'm interacting with them on a normal basis. And what I was, you know, encountered in that moment was, I'm not ready for this.
Got you. So let's spend a little time on that.
Let's
because on the understanding, I do hear, you know, a lot of guys say, you know what, I wish I would have more understanding of my role. Even though I knew I was going to be a husband, even though I knew I was going to be a father, I wish in the beginning I would have understood my role. And those of you that are tuning in, please share the broadcast. And so I want to know, because you kind of went into it already. Did you fully understand the role that you played, and then, or you had the role that she expected, and was her idea of you being a father in the household unrealistic?
Man, great question. And you know, as I remember the situation, I think there was a lot of assumptions. Gotcha. You know, there's a whole lot of assumptions, and I think that that's one of the tricky things about this particular topic. The assumption was, hey, you'll come in right away, you'll be the man of the house. You know, like I said, I just learned how to balance the checkbook, so I didn't, you know, really know what that meant. You know, I had an idea, or I had my own perception of what being a man of the house was, but as far as the responsibilities of taking somebody to school and doctor appointments and stuff like that, the reality was I was very selfish. I didn't want to do all of that. Gotcha. You know, but the expectation is that it didn't. Plus, I liked to hang out back then, you know, and so it was kind of like, hey, why don't you we'll just stay at home and eat? And I'm like, I want to go hang out, you know. And so the reality is that the model that I would have been to those young boys would not have been the best example. And I think because we really didn't have the opportunity to, I think we were very ginger about having that conversation.
So y'all didn't really lay out that plan for you?
No, because I think, truth be told, I think there was like this inner thing where we were like afraid to really have that real conversation. Yeah. And that's why we ultimately ended up having to end that relationship, because I finally had the courage to say, I'm not ready for this. You know, I've been faking the funk though, you know, for this year and change, but you know, the reality is that I'm not ready for what this entails, you know. And so, you know, that's why we had to end that relationship.
Okay. Because I asked because sometimes the expectations can be a little unrealistic, based upon what the partner or the wife is requesting or expecting. And for example, disciplining.
Man,
Some women they primarily look as the man, as the one that's responsible for the disciplining, and sometimes, you know, she may forget and have that misunderstanding, like, look, you know, even though we are married, you know what I'm saying, you know, that's still not my son. You get what I'm saying?
I
so,
do.
You know, how do you expect me you know, at this stage right now, you know, how do you expect me to fulfill that position?
Man, I'm glad you brought that up, because, you know, now that highlights the example I really wanted to bring out in this conversation. And that's with one of my closest friends. You know, I consider him a brother. We essentially grew up together, you know, from kids to adulthood. And he grew up in a household where he had a stepfather.
Right.
Now, the thing about it was his stepfather came on the scene when he was already like 13. So he already kind of had that inclination that I'm the man of the house, and here you are trying to come in here and tell me what to do. And, you know, you ain't my dad, you know what I'm saying? And I was, you know, telling you about this before we started the show. You know, that I remember, you know, making fun of him, like, yo, go ask your dad, can you go outside? Be like, hey man, that ain't my dad. You know, he would get mad about that. But the reality is that there was always this contention. And the irony is that, you know, his mother and his stepfather, they actually ended up getting divorced some years later. And then after the fact, several years after that, as a man with his own children, he actually came across his former stepfather. And he said, man, you know, I had to apologize to him and tell him that, you know, I'm sorry that I didn't give you a chance, because now that I have kids, I understand the things that you were trying to say. Here's the issue. I've seen instances where the mother essentially blocks the stepfather's ability to lead in that household. And what happens is that the stepchildren, they almost become off limits. And so by default, at best, the stepfather is like an advocate or a friend, but he can't be the disciplinarian in his own house. And I know that hinders a man's ability to lead. I know that it's you know, from the subconscious standpoint, it impacts, you know, our beliefs about our manhood, because here we are leading a house, but we don't have a say of what goes on in the house. And so much, you know, to the point where you feel like your hands are tied as it relates to the other people, you know, who are in this household. And, you know, from a very disastrous and a very dangerous standpoint, what I've seen happen is that because this stepfather is unable to really embrace his role with the stepchild, they end up just isolating themselves. You know, I detach myself from this person. You're just an extra bill in the house, as opposed to somebody I'm supposed to create this nurturing relationship with.
Most definitely. And in terms of that, it wasn't able to create that bond. That
Exactly.
bond. You know, that reminds me of a guy that, you know, when I used to live in Hawaii, and, you know, it used to be a group of us. I always used to hang out outside, and this one guy, I think we was in the 4th or 5th grade, and, you know, sometimes we'll slip up and we'll say your dad, you know, or your father, whatever the case may be. And I remember he would adamantly say, no, that's not my dad. Even if we did slip up, he'll make sure, you know, that's not my dad. You know, and I remember that anger behind him saying that. You get what I'm saying? Making sure that we knew. And don't forget it, we knew that. And he was still, I think he was still hurting from that. He still had some pain about that. And I think that's something that we have to remember too, especially if you are, you know, about to, you know, get into that type of family, you know, that divorce affects everyone. And is very, very heavy. And that child can have some resentment. They can have some anger, you know, and the question is, how are we going to handle that as well? And not just how are we going to handle it, but are we going to take some time out to have that understanding? You get what I'm saying? Because, you know, because after I was doing some research, you know, majority of the people who end up divorcing, they end up remarrying within the next 3 years. Majority of them. That is right around the corner. You get what I'm saying? So that child can still be healing from that, trying to adjust from that, and then you come into the picture. It's how do I handle that? You get what I'm saying?
I do.
I remember one guy, he said, you know, I came in with the picture already. You know, I already imagined us spending time with each other and going outside and playing basketball, or you know, going out to the movies and spending all this time with each other. I imagined that, and I expected it, but that didn't happen.
That's good.
So, and he said, since that didn't happen, I responded by pushing back, and I just thought that he just needed his space, and I just stopped making those attempts. And further down the line, he understood that, you know what, that wasn't the best move to make, and he actually regretted making that decision, because he found out that, you know what, I should have continued making those attempts, because those attempts were still signs of love. It was still signs that I care. You get what I'm saying? So that's how he handled that, and that's very tough.
I mean, that's good, because, you know, and also I think what that does is that that corroborates what I was talking about as far as the isolation. You know, when you're struggling to make those connections, what end up happening is, once again, you just kind of distance yourself emotionally from that person. You know, and it's almost like the waiting game. I can't wait till you get out of my house, you know, so me and your mom can do what we got to do, you know. You know, one of the things I was thinking about also, you know, one of the things that I think men who are entering into these type of relationships, once again, you have to have a good understanding of what the expectations are, and arm yourself with information as you get into that relationship. You know, one of the things that I know happened to a very good friend of mine is that the father, the biological father, was actually trying to control things from his house. And so, you know, that's another, you know, nuance that you have to consider. You know, okay, how does this child's father, how do they engage with one another? You know, what are our interactions going to look like with one another? You know, at the end of the day, yes, that's your son, yes, that's your child, but they stay in my house. And so how do we have this, you know, the symbiotic relationship where it's not, you know, disastrous, where your son feels like they have autonomy because I'm not their father, but they live under my roof, you know. And so, like I said, I've seen that work out good, you know, and I've seen it work out bad. You know, I one of my close friends, him and his ex-wife and her husband and his daughter, man, they're like an extended family. You know, they love each other. But then I also seen other brothers who be like, hey, that man can't touch my son. He can't discipline my child. You know, and if he disciplines my child, I'm gonna come over there and I'm gonna beat him up. And so now you're essentially bullying this other adult, you know, and pretty much running their household, because you're saying that, hey, this person can't discipline you because I'm your disciplinarian. And so, you know, it's you know, it can be a very tricky thing, you know, if you're not having these conversations in those relationships, especially as you see them progressing.
Most definitely, and I keep hearing communication.
Exactly.
We gotta have that communication.
Exactly.
And we gotta remove those barriers.
Yeah.
And you know, I think sometimes we can come in with the idea that he's the enemy.
Yeah.
You get what I'm saying? And I'm talking about that the father's probably the enemy, or even vice versa. The stepfather or the person coming in is the enemy. And the thing is, when it comes down to fatherhood, you know, our egos are big.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want, at the end of the day, that's really connected to our masculinity and our ego. So when the thought of another man
raising your child,
exactly, that hits us very hard.
Yeah.
But as a man, we need to have that understanding. So then when that brother responds a certain way or reacts a certain way, we can have some understanding, just think, you know what, maybe the table was turned, I probably may react the same way. Or, you know what, I understand that fatherhood means a lot to him. You know, I can see why, you know, he may have a barrier up right now. But let me see what I can do, what I have control over to see, you know, how we can really create some level of understanding. We may not be friends.
Yeah.
We may not, you know, be pals, but we can at least be cordial. We can at least have an understanding of each other's expectations and each other's goals. I think it's very, very important to, to some level, to some degree, have that cordial relationship. Is that always realistic? Of course not, you know, but the attempt means a lot. The attempt means a whole lot. But I do think it's very, very important to have those conversations early.
Exactly.
And, you know, over time, when I'm having conversations with other people, is mind-boggling how, you know, we'll delay things over time, and the things that we should have already had a conversation with we're having those conversations after the marriage. And we got to hold ourselves accountable with that. You know, we got to really understand, okay, there's a huge dynamic that's about to happen, you know, and we need to understand, okay, what needs to happen right now so we can nip it in the bud, so we can really take care of it, so we can polish it, so we can fine tune it right now. And one of those biggest things from the beginning is really just having that sit down, just saying, hey, look, this is what's going on. This is what I feel uncomfortable with. These are my expectations. This is what I want. This is what I expect, and so forth. And I really do believe in many cases that will help.
I mean, that's huge. And once again, I really believe in relationships. We just leave a lot of stuff up to assumption.
Right.
And oftentimes those assumptions are based upon our own experiences. And if you and your partner don't share experiences, then it's very, very dangerous to leave stuff up to assumption, to assume that they're going to handle things that you would hope that they would handle. Right. The only way they'll handle it the way you would hope they handle it is by having the conversation, saying, hey, look, this is what the expectation is. Can you meet this expectation? You know, and so you owe it to not only yourself, but once again, if you have children, you owe it to them, because your decisions impact them as well. You know, and once again, you know, using the example that I referenced from my own experience, you know, in dating this woman, you know, she said, hey, you know, if any man wants to be with me, he has to accept my children. And that's a very real statement. And that was a statement at the time that bothered me. I'll be 100% honest with you, because once again, I liked her, but, you know, I was not ready for that responsibility. And in her articulating it, that always stuck with me as our relationship progressed, you know, because the reality is, once again, I was not ready to fulfill that role. But she articulated an expectation, and I was unable to meet that expectation. And because I wasn't, it necessitated us ending that relationship. And so, for as hard as these conversations may be in having, they're needed, because what will end up happening is that they should halt any damage that can happen on the other side. And I think how we continue to progress in that relationship, you know, it could have been disastrous, you know. And so, you know, all things worked out, you know, as they were supposed to. But the reality is, once again, you know, fathers, mothers, you know, wherever you fall in this relationship dynamic, you're going to have these serious conversations. And I'll be 100% honest with you. I believe that assuming the role of a stepfather is probably easier if the child is younger, you know, and don't really have an understanding of the totality of what happened with their parents. But because, you know, and I only say that once again because, you know, as young boys progress, as we mature, you know, up, you know, we start to form our own ideologies and opinions of things. And, you know, there is a reason why, you know, if you look at the Wild Kingdom, why, you know, the male, the alpha male runs off the young males, you know, because there's a point in time when there is a contention. And like I said, it does make things very difficult when you have a young male in your house or a young person in your house who doesn't respect you, and they feel like they're safe because of their relationship maybe with their biological parent, you know.
Right. Yeah, and this is a very relevant topic because there are a lot of blended families.
Exactly.
And when you was talking about the expectations, I think one of the things I just want to add quickly that helps is when we know that someone is verbalizing the expectation. Help yourself out too by asking, what does that mean? What does that look like? Can you give me some examples? Because that really helps you identify and really specify what exactly they are verbalizing and communicating to you and what's expected of you. Because even by me saying or them saying, I expect you to be the father, that can mean so many different things. So really help yourself out with doing that as well. But I really, really enjoyed this topic. If anyone has any topic suggestions, please DM us, please inbox us, email us whenmenopenup@gmail.com. And if you have any upcoming events that you want us to participate in, you can easily go to whenmenopenup.com or inbox us, send us an email and so forth. But you have anything else you wanted to add, man?
Yeah, I just want to say before we close out on this one that for my brothers who are assuming this role as stepfather, just know that that young person, there is power in your voice, and just be consistent. I think consistency at the end of the day will make the difference. And so whether it looks like, once again, you're making that impact right away, or whether it's a gradual thing, I believe that there will come a point in time when they're able to look back and say, you know what, despite our differences, my stepfather was there for me, And so be consistent in the relationship. Get to know that person, understand the fact that you're coming to their life. It's not just you're marrying their mother, but it's, you taking a leadership role in their household. And I think one of the best signs of any good leader is to get to know those you are leading. Don't assume because you're in the role that they know how to follow, but be willing to be vulnerable with them. And I believe that as you do that, you'll find yourself being an effective parent for that young person. But besides that, I just want to say thank you all for participating and joining us on tonight. We are actually getting ready to transition from our second season, so we'll be taking a short hiatus. I think this mainly impacts those who listen to us by way of satellite radio. We'll still be getting on social media platforms here and there over the next couple of weeks, but season 3 of When Men Open Up, for all of our iHeartMedia listeners and Spreaker and all of the satellite radio followers, we will be resuming again in August. So we just say, as always, appreciate you. Thank you for supporting us in our mission to bring clarity and insight for men who are struggling in the areas of, the various subject matters that we talk about. At the end of the day, we're talking about manhood and being, what does it mean to be a man? And we were doing this by having these difficult conversations and being transparent, so that we can begin to chip away at a lot of the unhealthy attitudes as far as manhood, being overly aggressive. At the end of the day, it is our hope that our message really speaks to being a balanced man.
Right.
And so if you're hearing that, then that means we're doing our job. So as always, we appreciate you, brother. I appreciate you,
man.
And that's all I have.
Yeah, man. And we're going to continue bringing on these sensitive topics, but we need you all's help as well. So I think season 2, we really kicked it up a notch with really bringing those topics that are very difficult, very challenging, but that needs to happen. And the next thing I just want to say, it's okay that we don't always know the answers. That's just something that, as the man, we want to have all the answers. We want to be the problem solver on a regular basis. But sometimes the best response and the best reaction is to seek understanding. So we always have that mindset with seeking understanding and doing whatever it takes to have that understanding. I believe we're going to be on the right track. But in partnership with WYTV7 Christian Broadcasting Network, this is When Men Open Up. a show where we are redefining manhood through transparency. My name is Dominique Bond.
I'm Dexter Peggers.
And we are out. See you all next season. Thank you so much.